How you doing? Hello everybody, welcome back to the Educate Call Snap channel. We will be talking about Absorbing Brood. That's the Forge into Brood into Absorbing Man deck that's seen a lot of popularity, seen a lot of rise. It has a lot of interesting tidbits. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most difficult deck to pilot, but it does have a lot of things, so let's begin. So what is Absorbing Brood? Well, the deck is kind of based around this Forge into Brood into Absorbing Man combo. The whole strategy, the whole reason you play this deck is to kind of abuse Forge with Brood. So Forge with Brood, Forge gives the next card +3, but Brood copies that power. So you end up getting a +9 on your turn 3 card, and then Absorbing Man also has 5 power base. So because it has 5 power base, you're also getting this huge 15 power. So Forge with Brood, that's 15 power with the Brood, and then Absorbing Man with the 5 power base, also 15 power. So it just creates huge swings of power very early in the game, and it's really hard to deal with, as well as it has lots of synergies through other cards to just really feel oppressive. So the standard list we have here just has the kind of true and tested deck list. I do think there are some flexibility to be made, but you're really just using Surfer with Brood, Patriot with Brood, Iron Lad with copying either the Brood or the Sinister or the Absorbing Man. You've got Blue Marvel since you're summoning tons of cards. Legion is just a very, very nice tech card to have in the game right now, no matter pretty much what you're playing. Chavez for the consistency, because the deck does feel a lot worse if you don't get the Brood into the Forge into Brood combo or the Brood into Absorbing Man combo. So that's just there. And then Wasp is free power to add into probably your last couple turns. So. And then Shang-Chi is just in every deck these days, so not really too surprising there. So very, very nice list. Let's look through some of the other cards we have added. So first off, of course, is going to be Forge. Forge is the core piece. It did get buffed. That's why a lot of people haven't been using this card previously, but it just synergizes so well with Brood. The ability to give 9 power, a 2-cost card giving 9 power. It's just insane. So the synergy cannot be denied. It's the reason you're really playing this deck, and it just has a lot of power and just a very, very strong card. Next up, we have Brood is the key win condition. I would say this is by far the most important card in the deck. If you don't have this card, you're losing so many synergies in your deck. It's the whole deck is based around this Brood, so you have to really be in a very favorable position if you want to dominate Snap without playing Brood at all. But this allows Forge to be really powerful, allows Absorbing Man to be really powerful. It's just a critical piece. If you don't have Brood, you don't have this deck at all. Next up, we have Absorbing Man. So this one is also a core piece just because it's a premium follow-up to Brood that allows you to just replicate that 15-point play without the Absorbing Man. You really do have like this cheeky Forge into Brood, which is cool, which is strong, but it's not something worth really focusing and building a whole deck around. So the Absorbing Man allows you to really do that. Just allows you to contest 2 lanes very easily. It's also a really nice lad hit. Let's say you don't have Absorbing Man, but you did get the Forge into Brood. Well, Iron Man can also hit that Absorbing Man, and then you'll also get the Brood power. So it's just a nice synergistic card that works very, very well here. Next up, we have Mr. Sinister. So this is a secondary target for your Forge and your Absorbing Man. If you don't get Brood, yes, it does suck. Yes, it does feel worse, but this does give you something to do, something to play. So it means that your game isn't over if you don't have the Brood combo. With this, at least you can still do some combos. You get 2 copies. So Forge into Sinister, it's 2 copies, and then Brood. And then Absorbing Man will also give you 2 copies. So it's just another secondary win condition, not as strong, and you lose the complete synergy with Surfer if you're playing this game plan, but it does mean that you're not dead in the water if you don't get the combo. Next up, we have Iron Lad. So Iron Lad just has a ton of powerful hits to combo with in this deck. It's an alternative win condition if you don't have the best setup early. Iron Lad can hit the Brood, can hit the Sinister, can hit the Absorbing Man, can hit Blue Marvel. So there's a lot of really good hits here that Iron Lad can just give you tons of power and give you a way to win, even if it initially didn't look like you had a way to win. So just a really strong card. I wouldn't necessarily call it core, but it gives you an alternative win condition if your initial plans do not work out. So pretty good card in this deck. Next up, we have Patriot. So Patriot just buffs a majority of the cards you're playing. 1 second. Just buffs the majority of the cards you're playing, and it allows for very nice late game combos. So things like you can go Patriot into Surfer, which we'll be talking about soon. But since your your Wasp, your Mr. Sinister, and your Broods are all no ability, you can definitely give them tons of stats with the Patriot. So you got to keep that in mind, especially if your opponent is contesting your Brood lane, which it can be hard to avoid since sometimes you're putting down 5 Broods in the game. Patriot just says, okay, you're contesting my lane. I'm going to give them 6 power, 5 power, 4 power. You can't give 5 power, but you get the point, right? It's a good card for buffing, especially in the late game. Next up, we have Silver Surfer. So this is another follow-up. I would say this one is not as important as Patriot because you just have less targets. Silver Surfer is really all about manipulating the Brood. So if you don't have Brood, Surfer has practically no value. So that's something you have to keep in mind. If you are trying to play a Broodless game, your Surfer gives you nothing. So very often you'll have a game where you don't hit Brood, but you have the Surfer, and you're deciding, oh, where and when can I play the Silver Surfer? There's really no advantage to playing it. It's going to be a 2 cost, maybe 4 power card at best. So if you do have the Brood, then this card is amazing. This card can be insane. You can get 8, 10 power increases with this card. So can be super, super, super strong. But if you don't have the Brood, if you are playing a suboptimal game state, then it's really not a very premium card. So how do you pilot this deck? Well, first we have to talk about the key combo, which we've been talking about all day because it's really the whole point of this deck. The Forge into the Brood into Absorbing Man combo that generates 31 points of power by turn 4 and is the main reason you play this deck, is the main win condition. It's why it feels oppressive. This is why you play it out. Now, the other options are for when you do not have that line. I said opinions. It should be options. There's a T that I'm missing in there somewhere. But the other options are when you do not have this line, because if you have this line, you go for this line. This line is so strong. But if you don't, right, this is usually where the difficulty lies. This is usually where the piloting starts to show up. So let's talk about what you do if you don't have it. Now, even if you don't have Forge, Brood into Absorbing Man is still a large amount of power. The Brood is 6, the Absorbing Man is 15. That's 21 power on turn 3 and 4. That's still very powerful, very respectable. So even if you don't have the Forge, doesn't mean you can't play it out, doesn't mean you have to wait. Just play the Brood into Absorbing Man. It should still be a very powerful thing to do. Now, if you do have that scenario, Forge into Sinister can be a very powerful late game play. The Forge and the Sinister, 4 energy, you're getting 12 power. Usually it'll be done on turn 5 or turn 6, so you're still 5 energy for 12 power is still very, very good. And that's, you're not including any of the extra buffs you're putting in, like a Patriot or something like that. So still very, very strong. Mr. Sinister can be used as an alternative option. Once again, I guess option and opinion sounds very similar, very similar to me. if you do have Brood. But yes, Mr. Sinister can be used as an alternative option. So if you don't have the Brood, sometimes Sinister is just your best bet. You forge into Sinister into Absorbing Man. You're not getting 31 power, but you're getting, I believe, 21 power, which is still very reasonable. So it's something you should be aware of and should be doing if you don't have that perfect start. Now, I will say if you're trying to play it out, playing both Sinister and Brood can create board space problems, because if you follow that up with Absorbing Man, you have to be super careful. You might be locking a lane too early where your opponent can easily just generate enough power to beat you. So you do have to be careful about that. But usually with smart play, it's not too much of an issue. But just keep in mind that if you are playing Sinister and then Brood and then Absorbing Man, that's already 8 spots out of the maximum 12. Right, before you haven't played your 5, you haven't played your Wasp, right? And you have 1 space and 2 lanes, so just be aware if that is what you're trying to do. Just be super aware that, hey, I might not have enough board spaces to do everything, right? Like theoretically, you could go Sinister, Brood, Absorbing Man. Turn 5, you go Blue Marvel. Turn 6, you go Chavez, and then Wasp. Right, so that would work. You'd have 1 space left, right? But if your opponent is giving you any cards, or the locations are giving you any cards, then you're locked out, right? Like, so you just have to be careful about things like that. So Iron Lad can be used liberally, as there are many great hits. So I wouldn't really worry about thinking too hard about the Iron Lad. Iron Lad is just a card you just drop down when it makes sense and see what you get and then react to it. So always keep in mind the possibility of Iron Lad hitting Brood or Mr. Sinister, and just keep spacing your board for that outcome. But it's just a card you want to be playing because it can just give you the game plan if you didn't have it initially, right? So if you had nothing to do, Iron Lad can just give you that option. So always be aware of that. And then Patriot and Surfer are usually used later in the game. They're not cards you play on 3 or 4. Usually you're holding that for the Brood. But later on, turn 5, turn 6, that's when you can really start shining with the Patriot and the Surfer. Popular, powerful turn 6 plays to go Wasp into Patriot into Surfer and just get tons of value everywhere. So pretty good. So, and then your other cards, your Shang-Chi, your Legion, and then sometimes your Blue Marvel, they can either be used for tempo or for tech. You're not really going to use Shang-Chi for tempo, but Legion and Blue Marvel can definitely be used for tempo, or you can use them as a tech surprise tool. Shang-Chi, of course, and then Legion with location changing can definitely mess people up, and then Blue Marvel can just be surprise power that your opponent's not expecting. So also be aware of the turn 6 Chavez draw if you're playing Chavez, and just making sure you're not hoping to draw something on turn 6 when you should assume it's always going to be Chavez. So sometimes when people aren't familiar with playing Chavez, they're like, oh, if I draw the Silver Surfer turn 6, it's insane while you're drawing Chavez. So just keep that in mind when you're making your decisions earlier in terms of how to play it. Next up, we have some of the powerful plays here. These are plays I've already talked about, but just having them in image form tends to help some people. So Iron Lad, right, hitting a Brood, hitting a Sinister can be 18 power, 12 power, very, very strong stuff in 1 card. Then you have the standard, the combo, the reason for the deck. You have the Forge into Brood and the Absorbing Man. Really solid stuff, very, very powerful. And then the turn 6 play, something like Wasp into Patriot into Surfer is also really good. Another turn 6 play that happens pretty often, I would say, is Wasp or just Sinister into Absorbing Man. If you didn't have the combo, you maybe just had Forge into Brood, then turn 6 you can go Sinister into Absorbing Man. You got 4 power with the Sinister, and then you get 10 power with the Absorbing Man. So 14 power turn 6 can be even better if you have a Patriot down on the field. So something to keep out for. And here we have some of the flex spots. Decent amount of flex spots, I would say, in this deck. You don't necessarily need every single card here. The main engine is the 3, so anything else is just like synergizing or affecting that combo, but not necessarily core. In terms of some of your flex pro options, there's a okay amount. I wouldn't say you can definitely change up like all the deck and it's the same, gonna play the same, but it does have a lot of different options you can do. Jeff is pretty popular. Armor, Luke Cage, these are some pretty popular 2-drops. Goose as well is something you can do. In terms of the 3-drops, you have Dazzler, Cyclops. Cyclops benefiting both from Patriot and Silver Surfer, so that's something you can do. And then Shadow King, in terms of the tech options, right, we have a lot of them. Shadow King, for the mirror matches, you just mess with the Forge buff. Super Scroll takes the Patriot buff, takes the Blue Marvel buff. Rogue as well does the same thing, and Echo can mess people up in terms of... I notice, myself included, people don't play around Echo because they forget what it does and they don't see it often enough that it's something they're consciously thinking about. So you could definitely surprise people with that as well. Now, in terms of core card alternatives, you do need Brood, you do need Absorbing Man. If you don't have that, if you're still early in pool 3 and you just don't have those cards, well, you can't play this deck. Now, in terms of what you want to do if you don't have Iron Light or Legion, which is the 2 common cards that people are going to be saying, hey, I don't have these 2 cards, you can definitely run tech cards, so any tech that you want. But in particular, some of the more common ones, right, is Luke Cage, Jeff, Armor, Shadow King, Spider-Ham, and also Doctor Doom is also something people tend to play. So those are some of the tech cards. And I would say you don't need Iron Light and Legion. A lot of times when I'm making deck guides, people are like, oh, I don't have these cards, I can't play this deck. I wouldn't say that. Obviously, the deck functions better with some of the core cards, right? Iron Light gives you an alternative win condition, which is hard to replace. But tech cards can do better for you. It can be more effective than alternate win conditions, because if you can just shut down decks that you're losing to, mirror matches that you're losing to, well, then that's way better of an advantage of sometimes having an alternate win condition. So just keep that in mind. Now, in terms of when to snap, obvious one is you have Forward Brood and Absorbing Man start. Forward Brood start might be good enough by itself, but Forward Brood Absorbing Man, if you want to snap early, can be the difference maker for you. Then if you're trusting Iron Lad, so you've looked in your what's left in your deck, everything makes sense, well, that can be a very powerful swing turn. And just like with Jubilee, you've got to trust the card before you play it, knowing that your deck, it works out for your deck on average. And then powerful turn 6s, so something like the Patriot Surfer combo we talked about, or the Absorbing Man with Sinister combo, those powerful turn 6 can do a lot for you. And then just having tech answers, so anytime you can Shang-Chi them, anytime you can Legion them effectively, anything like that, it's always a good time to snap. Now, what are the weaknesses, right? I've definitely seen a lot of comments kind of with the impression of there's no weaknesses to this deck, which is not true. It's just that if you don't have the any counters, the deck is oppressive. And even the counters aren't always guaranteed to win, right? Which some people like, oh, I have the counter, I'm always going to win this matchup. Not really true. I would say this is definitely one of the strongest decks in the game right now. So it's hard to always have a counter that will always win the strongest deck. They're the strongest deck for a reason, right? Because if they had clear weaknesses, people wouldn't be complaining about it, because people would be like, oh, just do this, right? And it would just ebb and flow. But since it has this oppressive 3-card combo, the weaknesses are more situational at times. So things like Cosmo, things like Enchantress, they're great. If you can predict the Cosmo, it's insane. If you can Enchantress, their Patriot, the Blue Marvel, it's pretty decent. Shadow King can work well. Valkyrie can work well. Issue is sometimes they're running Luke Cage. So if they are running Luke Cage, right, your Shadow King's not doing anything, and your Valkyrie's not really doing anything, unless you Enchantress the Luke Cage or something like that, which isn't that common. So that's some of the caveats there. In terms of junk, this deck tends to fill a lot. So if you can do things like Debris, things like Green Goblin, those can do a lot of damage because you're locking down the lanes before they can really fully utilize it. So junk has a really good matchup here. And then things like Deathstrike, things like Hazmat, where you're affecting their cards and you're affecting decks that summon a lot of things. Death Strike, especially Forge Death Strike, can do a lot here. And then Hazmat, if you have like Wong into Hazmat, you're just hitting so many targets that it's sometimes hard to deal with. So once again, right, Luke Cage is pretty good tech. If you are trying to play this into a lot of tech-heavy decks, Luke Cage does deal with a lot of things, so keep that in mind. Now, here we have some example builds. First one, I do have some more descriptions. Usually I just have numbers. This one has Jeff added. That's the key difference here. Taking out the Chalvers, we put in the Jeff. Jeff is just a nice card, a very flexible 2-drop, fits in a lot of decks, fits here perfectly as well. So that's the difference with this one. Second one, we've taken out the Lad. So a lot of people say, oh, we don't have Lad. Well, I'd say here, you can just play Luke Cage. That's perfectly fine. You don't need the Lad. Lad is great, but you don't need it. If you want to play the deck, you want to have fun with the Forge Brood combo, don't need it. Luke Cage, perfect tech card to add in this deck. Deals with a lot of the annoying counters that you might encounter. Next up, no Legion. Once again, some people are going to say, I don't have Legion. What should I do? Here, we've changed things up a little bit. We're running Armor. We're running Cyclops. Those are some of the differences here. So there's a little bit less tech counters here, but you do get to run Cyclops, which just double dip with the Patron, the Surfer, and then Armor is just a nice safe card to put in, especially with all the destroyed decks that are running in the game right now. And next up, what if you don't have Iron Lad or Legion? Well, here, this is a deck list. It doesn't run Iron Lad, it doesn't run Legion, does run Jeff, so there's only Jeff in here. But if you're missing Iron Lad and Jeff and Legion, then like, what are you using your tokens on, right? Is my question. So this is definitely a deck you can build if you are running, if you do need something to play, you don't have Legion, you don't have Iron Lad. That's something to do. And the last one we have is a tech-heavy build. So this one just runs a lot of tech to deal with a lot of different matchups. So you have Armor for like Destroy matchup, you have Rogue for mirrors, things like that. And just a lot of little tech cards. You don't run Shang-Chi. That's the one like less tech card. A lot of people are running Shang-Chi, so you don't run Shang-Chi in here. But I do think if you are running mirrors, it makes sense not to run Shang-Chi since this deck isn't very Shang-Chi-able. So if you know that, then it doesn't really make that much sense, especially if you're running Armor, right? It's not that important to have Shang-Chi. So I think this makes a lot of sense here. So something to do. So overall, that is the deck list here. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a pretty strong deck. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Sometimes when I win, I have fun winning, so I have a lot of fun with it, and hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts on the deck list, and I am hoping for it to get changed in the future. I do think the Forge Brood combo is too strong. I don't know if that combo would be adjusted, or maybe Absorbing Man would be adjusted, right? Maybe I would look into making Absorbing Man like 4 power. That's something maybe I would be looking into. But overall, that's my thoughts on the deck list. Hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Educated Colin Snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap.